Welcome back after your midterm exam, July 13th, 2016. We're now halfway through the course. I hope you did very well in the midterm exam, and I will try to get to those exams as soon as possible so that you can get your grades back. Once I do have them back, they will show up in your Dropbox with the grade on them. If for any reason you have difficulty accessing them there, I can also send you the results directly. You're welcome to contact me in order to get that information if you need it. Today we now turn to chapter 14 of our Harris-Platzner textbook. We now move to a new unit related specifically to the city of Athens and especially to Greek tragedy. And I'm going to be talking now over the next several lectures about Greek tragedy itself as a drama form, plus also Athenian history as it relates to Greek tragedies. There actually are three separate segments of Athenian history that matter. We're going to be focusing a little bit on prior to the 5th century BC, that is prior to the 400s BC, and then we're going to look very closely at Persian wars, which goes with Aeschylus. We're going to look at in between Persian and Peloponnesian wars, which is related indirectly to both Sophocles and Euripides, and then finally at the Peloponnesian War itself, which is related much more closely to Sophocles and Euripides. So that will be coming up over the next 3 days. I will also discuss the presentations that need to be completed for those 3 days. But for right now, let me introduce you now to some background on Greek tragedy itself. So what I have drawn here is a diagram of what a Greek theater would look like. And at this point, I would like you to please pause your video. And I would like you to locate in your Harris-Platzner textbook pages 509 and 510. So please find your Harris-Platzner textbook and please open to pages 509 and 510. Pause your video and then please get those pages open. Okay, are you all set? Page 509 provides you with a diagram of what the Athenian Acropolis would have looked like. The theater that is over in the northeast side, that is the right of the picture, is the theater of Dionysus, which is one of the main theaters used for ancient Greek tragedy in the ancient Greek world, especially at Athens. And for a time, Athens was really the only city around that showed Greek tragedy on a regular basis. Other cities in time, first over in Sicily and then later over in the east, began to pick up Greek tragedy more. But it started primarily in Athens and then gradually got a foothold in other parts of the Greek world, Sicily and then later in the east. So the theater of Dionysus is shown there in the diagram. You'll notice that there is another smaller theater on the other side of the Acropolis. It's down in the lower left of the picture. That's actually a Roman theater. It's called the Odeon of Herodes Atticus. Interestingly, back in the early 90s, the New Age musician Yanni was away from Greece, which was his home country, for many years, but returned for the first time to perform one of his most famous concerts at that particular theater, together with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. So, in fact, ancient theaters can be used today for concerts, and in fact are. They have, as we'll talk about in a bit up here, they actually do have the acoustics for that, remarkably. But the one up in the top right of the picture, the Theater of Dionysus, is not in fact used anymore. It fell into disrepair back in the ancient world. So this is what the diagram shows you for the Acropolis in Athens. If you turn the page, you now can see a full spread of what a theater would look like to correspond with this diagram. If you happen to notice in the center of the diagram, there is a small dot. You'll see that it's a figure with a shadow. That is a person. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the theater. This is at least 2 football fields in length, possibly more. So it's really an enormous area. And as you'll notice, it is outdoors entirely. Ancient Greek productions were performed outdoors. Okay, let me now explain to you the parts of the theater. So as you probably can tell from your 2 pictures in the book, these round lines here are the seats. It's not easy to see in this flat diagram, but you can see definitely in the picture on page 510, the theater at Epidaurus, that this is really a bowl-shaped construction like this. For anybody who is either a mathematics or engineering major, you might realize that this is actually a parabola, and that in fact there's a focus at the center where all the sound waves can go in and then go out. So as a result, this is really an engineering marvel, because anybody standing in the center will be able to speak and have the sound travel very effectively up all the seats, so that anybody sitting on any of the seats will be able to hear. So you may actually prefer, if you were sitting in this theater, to be further away from the action up here. If you're down too low like this, everything's going to be right in front of you and it might be too confusing. You might actually want a further back seat so that you can see a better spread of what's going on down in front of you there. So you have the seats this way. The round section, the circle, is the orchestra. Despite the sound of the word, it's not really related to orchestra today, like a symphony orchestra. Instead, orchestra refers to the area where a chorus would dance, from the Greek verb orchomai, which means to dance. So this is the dancing area. Then you have a flat area up there. Now, I had to write the word large so you could see it. What's just written there is skene, the Greek word which is like our word see. It's not actually that rectangle. It actually would have been the raised backdrop that would have been used to provide what we would call scenery, like a backdrop to show the location or the setting at which a particular story is happening. I'm going to come back to the rectangle in just a moment. Now, there were a couple of devices that were built into a Greek theater. There was one called, on the top left corner, enkuklema in Greek, which is basically a wheel that allowed the theater to spin so that you could in fact rotate it and be able to change scenes. And that's especially useful, for instance, if you have a corpse in a Greek tragedy that you need to keep hidden until a certain dramatic moment in the play. So you keep it in back, wheel it around, and all of a sudden a corpse appears to everyone's astonishment. So that's enkuklema. And then over here, Deus Ex Machina is this big crane that would have been suspended above the stage and would have swung back and forth like this, probably several feet above the ground. And an actor can be attached to the crane and can play some airborne figure, most likely a god, but could be any number of other things too. We actually have a play by Aristophanes, the comic playwright, one called Peace, in which near the beginning of the play, a character actually rises up on this crane, riding on top of a dung beetle, an enormous beast that's going to go off with him to rescue a particular goddess named Irene, the word for peace, in distress. So it didn't have to be a god necessarily that was suspended up there on that crane, but that was in fact one of the most common types of characters who would be suspended up there. So you have skene, orchestra, enkuklema, and Deus Ex Machina. Then we have this interesting thing about where the rectangle is. That is in fact a raised stage, a wooden platform, which we can actually see in art. But interestingly, there was actually quite a bit of discussion in earlier Greek scholarship about whether or not there really was a raised stage. We have an interesting resolution to that problem from another play of Aristophanes called Wasps, in which we have an elderly gentleman who is gotten drunk at a party. He's drunk now, and he has kidnapped a flute girl who is naked. And the two of them get on stage, and his son tries to stop them from going around and raising mayhem everywhere. But eventually the old man just hits him off and drags this flute girl, the poor lady, off with him. And then there's a critical point. Now I should tell you, just to let you in on a secret about ancient Greek comedy, that the male characters were always padded, wearing these very complicated padded costumes, and then there was this leather phallus attached. So a Greek comedy was rather crude. So the old man turns to the woman and says, "Come on up here, my darling. Take hold of this rope. Be very careful, it's kind of old, but don't worry, it won't break because it loves being rubbed." Yes, it's as crude as it sounds. The thing you might not have heard, though, in being distracted about the rather penile nature of the joke is that he says, "Come up here, which means that there must have been a platform to step up on. That would be the only way that that particular joke would work, being told to step up onto something. So that's how we could tell that it is a raised stage, actually. All right, so those are the parts of the theater. Now, as far as the actual performance of a tragedy itself, much of our evidence comes from the work called Poetics, up at the top of the board. Aristotle, the famous philosopher, wrote this work describing what he had gathered in research about early Greek drama. Not surprisingly, ancient Greek drama was a product of worship of the god Dionysus, who was known later to be the god of theater. And there was, in fact, a song known as a dithyramb. I'll write it here for you on the board because it's a rather complicated word. And I will misspell it. And now we'll spell it correctly. The dithyramb is a choral piece sung by a group of people in honor of Dionysus. And it appears that the story of Dionysus, which as you may remember was quite tragic, he was born out of a fireball, then born out of Zeus's thigh, then born out of the body of Semele, and maybe reborn because of his heart after being torn up by Titans and so on. All sorts of crazy stuff went on with him. So the dithyramb honors Dionysus while some actor performing Dionysus tells the story. So this interaction between an actor and a chorus narrating the story of Dionysus is in fact the origin for the pattern of a chorus and a character written together. So you saw that with the playwright Euripides. Our second video for today is going to go through highlights of Euripides' bio and works. So when you come back to the next video, we'll talk about Euripides some more. But for right now, it's enough to know that the dithyramb is the choral work that is associated with the chorus performance during ancient Greek tragedy and comedy. And according to Aristotle, that was the origin for the choral element of ancient Greek drama. And then because you have this actor who performs the role of Dionysus on stage, we can then tie in that to being an actor on stage who then can perform any role on stage and then be accompanied by a chorus. So the story went around that the Athenians first performed a tragedy in 535 BC that would have been under the tyranny of Pisistratus in Athens. Someone named Thespis was supposed to have performed it. That theory is not accepted by scholars. However, it does mean potentially that there would have been a one-actor play that would have been performed at some point before the 5th century BC, when we now get two-actor and then even later three-actor plays. Now, Aristotle's theory was that after the original creation of tragedy from the dithyramb, that Aeschylus, the first of the three tragic playwrights in chronology, not actually the first one you read, since today you read Euripides' Bacchae, but the first one chronologically, would have added the second actor to the first actor, so that when he was performing plays on stage, there would have been two actors. The rule in Athens was initially only two actors, later three actors, had to do all the spoken parts, not including the chorus. That means you could have as many silent roles as you wanted to, but only three gentlemen, and it was men, never women, only three men had to perform all the roles, all through the play. And again, Aeschylus, according to Aristotle, was the first one to introduce the second actor in order to give some more dramatic interaction on stage and not have just one person narrating the whole thing. So Aeschylus was the one who first gave us the second actor, and then Sophocles later gave us the third, and Euripides also used the third. At no point in tragedy did it ever become common for a fourth actor to be used. However, in comedy, we do see this in Aristophanes, there was occasionally a use of a fourth actor for very small bit parts. But that was definitely the most there would have been. Never would you have gotten 5 or more actors on stage at one time. even though, as we said before, you could have silent actors on stage together with the speaking roles. You might wonder, well, how do these actors perform so many different roles? It's easier than you think. It's called the mask. The actors wear masks, and when they get off stage, they quickly change masks. So one reason why you see lengthy choral odes is kind of a stage device, because it is a way for an actor to get off stage and be able to change his mask and costume into another role. And sometimes he might do the same role a couple of times, so he might have the masks and costumes back in a particular area where they would be easy to pick up and change into when he needed to. So those are the basics of how Greek tragedy was run, and we now could talk about the festivals at which Greek tragedy was performed. There were two main ones in Athens. We mentioned previously the Panathenaic festival that was celebrated in honor of Athena every year. There was also the City Dionysia festival, celebrated in honor of Dionysus, that was held every spring. This was the really prestigious dramatic festival in Athens. And at this festival, tragic playwrights were required to supply 3 tragedies, preferably 3 stories that would interact and tell the same story, if possible, or at least have some thematic connection. 3 tragedies, and then this other play called a satyr, S-A-T-Y-R, satyr play, that would have been kind of like a burlesque, a way of probably lightening the tension after 3 very heavy tragedies, and essentially rather comically ending the whole series. A satyr is also a worshiper of Dionysus, so that of course would have been very appropriate. So it's in fact 4 plays altogether that were produced, and the judges appointed for the purpose then select out of all the competitors. And at different times historically, it was either 3 competitors or 5 who were competing. And they picked first place, second place, and third place. First place was outstandingly good, and second place wasn't really particularly honorable. And third place, you can well imagine, was pretty much a failure. When the Greeks competed, they competed to win, and losers would definitely not sympathize with. So that's the basics of how Greek theater worked. In the next video for July 13th, we'll talk about the first playwright we're going to give a handout for, which is Euripides. So please make sure that you have your handout number 1 ready with Euripides. And also we have a video that will describe the 3 presentations that need to be completed for the 3 playwrights for tomorrow, Thursday, July 14th, and then next week, Monday, July 18th, and Tuesday, July 19th. Okay, so we'll see you right back here with discussion of Euripides.